we're really in trouble. But I got my rifle if something goes crazy. It walked past the back of the truck, and then it kicked the stove, and it kicked the ice chest, and I think it kicked the lantern, and then it walked off down the road behind the pickup, and we listened to it for, another 10, 15 seconds as you could hear the footsteps as it walked off down the road. It seemed like it was like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to just kick your stuff.
Yeah, I shouldn't laugh, but I don't know why that portion of your encounter makes me laugh. It walks through your camp, kicks everything on its way out. It's like, Goodfellas, go get your shoe shine box.
I don't shine shoes anymore.
It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Gio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Susie from Southern California. You are listening to my favorite show, Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. We're going to be chatting with Ed, and Ed comes to us from California, and about 43 years ago, he was out hunting, and he had a very strange encounter with one of these creatures. That was Ed there in the intro that you guys heard at the very beginning of the show, and there's a lot of little tidbits in Ed's encounter, but I'll let Ed kind of go into it. We're also going to be chatting with Dylan, and Dylan's from the Northeast. He was down in Georgia for a car show. He got in an argument with his girlfriend, went out to kind of cool off and go for a walk, got more than what he bargained for that night. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Doing a little better tonight. I was telling the members, probably the public audience doesn't know, I actually separated my shoulder, and it's a little bit more painful than you might think. But I'm definitely doing better. I appreciate all of the well wishes. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Ed to the show. Ed, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I know that you had an encounter back in 1977. You were in the Sierras. If you would, Ed, just kind of start from the very beginning. Kind of tell us what you were doing and what ended up happening. What did you guys end up seeing?
Well, my buddy and I, we were 17 years old, and we were going deer hunting up in D zone of the Sierras near Arnold, California. And we were kind of late that day getting going, and we didn't get to the town of Arnold till about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. We wanted to get to bed at some point, because we wanted to get up early to go hunting. So we were kind of anxious to get going. So behind Arnold, there's just miles and miles of 2-lane dirt roads that just go everywhere through the Sierras, and lots of pine trees. It's really thick up in there. I'm driving my dad's old 62 Ford 3/4 ton, 8-foot bed truck. Thing as heavy as it can all get out. So I'm driving pretty fast. We're talking, and we're looking for a place to sleep. And I come around a corner, and there's a turnout kind of in this dirt road. So I cross the street, across the dirt road anyway, and I park as tight as I can against the trees because I don't want to get hit by any logging trucks or maybe a drunk driver or something in the middle of the night while we're sitting on the side of the road. So I get as close as I can to the trees just so I can open my door. So I park the truck, I squeeze out between the door and the trees. You know how trees will kind of like grow along the edge of a road, and there was kind of like a wall of trees that were young. They were 10, 15 feet tall, and I parked right against them just so I could squeeze through. And we went around, opened the tailgate, took everything out, the ice chest, the stove, lanterns, that kind of stuff, and threw it all on the ground behind the truck, locked the tailgate back up, and we climbed in the bed of the truck, laid our sleeping bags down. My partner was on the driver's side, and I was on the passenger side with our heads towards the back of the tailgate. We're just settling in. We just took our shoes off. We're going to be up in 4 or 5 hours. And so we just took our shoes off, climbed into our bags, and we're just laying there talking about what time we want to get up or something like, just little things before we fall asleep. And out of nowhere, there's just this huge howl that just goes off, and it sounds like someone's got a sports horn or something right in the front of the truck. And this goes on for 5 or 6 seconds, this big old howl, and then it just flips and turns into just gibberish that just goes on and on. And we both kind of like rolled in our bags towards each other up on our elbows and go, what the hell is that? And we go, we don't know. So we unzipped our bags and we run to the front of the bed, and we're like laying on the hood of the roof of the truck, and we're just staring down the road ahead of the truck, and it makes a bend in the road, and right at that bend of the road is a great big pine tree, and it's casting a shadow over the road. It's a full moon that night, I forgot to say. And so you can see everything really great except right the shadow of this tree that's crossing the road. And right in the dead center of the road is this big, massive looking thing. It's this dark, almost black looking shape in the road. And we're just, and it's only about 5 feet tall, and it's probably about 4 feet wide. And it just looks like, you can't quite see what it is. And it's just kind of blocky sort of, but it's swaying side to side. It's like rocking back and forth. And we're like stretched as far as we could over the cab, and we're looking at this thing, and my buddy's like, is that a bear? And I'm like, no. He's like, is it a turkey? I'm like, no. I mean, I can't tell what it is, but I know what it's not, and so we're like, well, I don't know what that is. What could that possibly be? Then it just raises up. So I had no idea it was squatted down, but it raised up, and as it raised, it just turned and was gone. I mean, it took it like a second and a half to get off the road, and it didn't stop when it elevated. It just like rolled right out of being squatted and just took off, which would have been to our left, behind that big pine tree I was talking about, and it headed down the hill. So as it's heading down the hill, it looks like it's like if a person would run down a hill that's got like stumps and weeds and stuff, it would be like, you'd be like, oh crap. And you'd be just running and, up and down and stuff. And this thing was like going in a fluid straight line. And I'm like, I think I see a head. And my buddy goes, is it flying? And I'm like, no, it's not flying. So we get about 4 or 5 seconds of that, and then disappears. So we jump out of the truck. I grab my rifle and we run up the street in our socks, and we get right to the point where it left the road. And we're standing there, and then we can realize that all the trees have been logged out of there, and it's about 75 yards deep, and it's about 50 yards wide, and it's probably a 15 or 20 degree slope. And we're standing at the edge of the road, and we're looking down the hill. And the craziest thing is I could see it because of the moonlight, and there's like this head, and you like see like a side view of it, like a shoulder or something, and it's darting back and forth. It's like going 20 yards this way, 20 yards that way, and then it's turning and coming back, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? And it's doing this like 10 or 12 times, like it's doesn't want to be there. It's, it's gone the wrong direction. I don't know what it's doing. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, and then my buddy goes, shoot it. So I'm like, I pick up, I got my rifle in my hands, and it's just an open sight, old bolt action Mauser rifle. And there's no way I could track it. It was moving too fast back and forth. My dad had always taught me, never shoot at anything if you don't know what it is and you don't have a good sight picture and all that kind of stuff. So I was never going to shoot it, but I was trying to track it with my rifle. And then it stops like right about in the middle. And then I'd raise my rifle about 15 yards over its head, and I crank off around. And then there's the muzzle flash because it's the middle of the night. And then when the flash goes away, it's completely gone. That was it. And we stood there for another minute or two going, what the hell is that? We're just like talking amongst ourselves going, I have no idea what the hell that is. So we go back to the truck, and we climb back in our bags, and we're laying there, and we're talking about it. And the howl, I really couldn't do it, but it sounded a lot like the Ohio howl, except it started with a B. It was like boo, it was really a strong B sound as the howl began. And then when it switched, it was just all this like vowels and consonants and crap that was just all mixed together in just a gibberish of things. And one of the sounds that it made was the la sound. Somewhere in all that was the la sound. And so we were discussing this back and forth, and my buddy goes, I know what it is. And I go, what? And he's like, it's the bula bula. And I go, okay, it's the bula bula. And so, 17-year-old kids, we're just joking about it, So, okay, we can make fun of it. We don't know what it is. We'll make fun of it. Let's call it the bula bula. So anyway, I don't know. Some time goes by, and I fall back asleep. I don't know if my buddy did, but I fell asleep, and then I'm just startled awake because the truck is rocking. I'm like, what's going on? And then, I come to my senses. I wake up, and I'm like, oh, something's got the front of the truck at the driver's side front bumper, and it's either picking it up or it's jumping on it because the whole truck is just rocking back and forth. And this is a big, heavy old truck. When I used to work on it, when I climbed underneath the hood, the truck never even moved, and I weighed like 160 pounds, and it didn't even flex. And here it is, this truck is just rocking like 2 or 3 feet, up and down. And then it stops. I can hear this thing like shuffling around the front of the truck. And I'm like, is it a bear? Is it? And then I'm like, oh crap, it's that thing we saw. It's back. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I'm like laying in my bag, and I got my rifle in my bag. It starts coming in between the truck and the trees, which is really tight. There was just enough room for me to squeeze through. And this thing is, I can hear it. It sounded like if you had like a dog or something with mud on it that had dried or whatever, and it's like scraping against the truck as it's coming towards us, and it's coming really slow. I just pull my sleeping bag over the top of my head, and I'm just going to play dead. And that's all I had was I'm going to play dead. And this thing slowly walks up the side of the truck. I mean, it took it like 30 seconds. It felt like an hour, but it probably took 30 seconds. It was just creeping up, and every time it took a step, I could hear it breathe, and I could hear it scrape on the side of the truck. And then it stopped right above my buddy and was just standing there. And, I'm only like 4 feet from it, but I can, it's breathing, and I can tell it's facing us. And yeah, I'm scared to death at this point. I'm just like, uh-oh, we're really in trouble. But I got my rifle if something goes crazy. And then it walked past the back of the truck. And then it kicked the stove, and it kicked the ice chest, and I think it kicked the lantern, and then it walked off down the road behind the pickup. And we listened to it for, another 10, 15 seconds as you could hear the footsteps as it walked off down the road.
Yeah, and I know that we're going back 43 years. You were just a 17-year-old kid when all this was going on. I want to ask you 2 questions. Did your friend feel the creature kind of lift the truck? And did you guys end up leaving?
Oh, no, we didn't leave. But he did. We talked to, it was, I don't know, I can't explain it, but neither one of us moved. We didn't speak until we woke up, until we got up. And then we started talking about it. But yes, he did the same thing. I never looked at him, but he had his bag over his head, and he was frozen stiff too. He knew it was there himself.
Yeah, I really want to ask you about the vocalizations that you heard. And I know that I have some new listeners. So when we talk about the Ohio howl, this was captured in 1994 in Ohio. I think it's really cool that you heard it with a B sound. Every time I've heard that, I always think of, that noise it's making. But I want to ask you about the gibberish that you heard. You've heard the Sierra sounds, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that most people have. If you haven't, go check out ronmoorhead.com. He's the one that actually captured what they called a samurai chatter. But there's 2 different versions or 2 different recordings of what they actually captured up there. The Al Berry tapes, which sound more like this. In my opinion, still creepy, but very animalistic. And then there's Ron when he was interacting with the creatures, and it sounds more like this.
That's our job. Never know where we went for tracks and all that for sure.
Yeah, when I listen to those, the first ones really sound like monkeys fighting over food. The second one definitely sounds like it has more language. I'm curious what you heard. Was it more like the first one or more like that second one that I played? Or maybe it didn't sound like any of them?
It was nothing like the aggressive, animalistic type of, like there's grunts and they're like forcing it to come out, you know what I mean? Like they're aggressive. It's nothing like that. And actually is high pitched. Like if it was more like a female, if that makes any sense at all. If the Sierra sounds is a mad male, this sound more like a scared female, like she was upset that we were there or something. I don't know. But it had all of it had a high pitch to it.
Yeah, and so what you heard sounded more like some weird language, not necessarily like monkeys fighting over a banana.
Yeah, it was definitely more language languagey, I guess. It was like, we were like, what? I don't know. It was hard. It's really, it was so fast, and it was like one syllable and vowel on top of another. It was just going fast, and there was probably 20 of those sounds in like 6 or 7 seconds or something like that. It just was flipping through them really quick. We didn't know what to think. We had been hunting a lot. Him and I met when we were like 14, and we had hunted everything that flew and crawled on the ground, and there's not much up in the Sierras, really. There's bears, there's deer, there's mountain lions, bobcats, maybe the occasional turkey. The pigs are kind of down lower, so you don't have a lot to pick from. And we were like 10 miles from the nearest little town. There's nothing out there. There's no homes, nothing. Just, I don't know what it's like today. I haven't been back there in a while, but it was just nothing but miles of pine trees is all it is out there.
Yeah, I think I already know your answer, but I have to ask it. I mean, we're going back 44 years ago. This is 1977, and you're getting out of the truck. And, in Oregon, Washington, and California, I think we've had a long history of these things being in the area. So even back in 1977, people were still talking about Sasquatch, not to the extent they are today, with social media and everything. But when you got out of the truck and then you fired a shot, kind of over its head, you're a 17-year-old kid at this time. What did you think it was?
I had no idea. I really didn't. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, this thing's got a head on it, and I don't know what that could be. You know what I mean? At the same time, I'm like, are my eyes playing tricks on me? And so it kind of verified it when my buddy said, shoot it, because we weren't really talking. We were just staring down the hill at this thing, running back and forth. And that was just the craziest thing. I'm like, why would it be doing that? But it was doing it. It was like, it didn't want to be there, and it wanted back on the road for some reason. And we had made it commit to something it didn't want to do, apparently. That's all I could think of.
Yeah, and I think being 17, really, I try and put myself in other people's shoes, and, if I was 17, I don't know that I would have done anything different. Well, there is one thing. I would have fired off the shot, then I would have gotten in the truck and gotten the hell out of there. But, that's me being 17. As far as hearing the vocalizations, and this may be something you may not be able to even answer, I'm curious on your feeling when you were there and kind of looking back. Do you think it was chattering or gibbering to you guys, or do you think it was talking to something else?
Yeah, I mean, having thought about this, off and on for, like I said, 40 years, I think there was something behind us. I think I came around the corner, and I was, like I said, I was moving fast because we just wanted to find a place to sleep. And I came around this curve and I just pulled it off to the side of the road. I think it was trying to call to something that was behind us. And maybe I separated them with the pickup. I don't know.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I think, when I very first heard your encounter, I was thinking of Randy Harrington. I've had him on the show before, but what Randy does is he'll go out, he's got all these crazy ideas, and I love crazy ideas, but what he'll do is he'll set up a campsite, an empty campsite, and watch it from a distance. And when I was listening to your encounter, I was sitting there thinking, I almost wonder if it vocalized to see if anyone was in the truck. And then you guys got out, guys chased it and had that situation happen. Later it comes back and it's checking to see if you guys are there. That's just kind of my thoughts on it, which, it's my opinion. It means very little, but I'm fascinated by its behavior, especially coming back and then kicking all your stuff on its way out, kind of like Goodfellas, go get your shoe shine box. It's kicking everything on its way out. But you might be right. You know what? It makes the most sense to me, Ed. Maybe you guys blocked its way out.
I mean, it could be either one. I don't know. But it seemed like it was like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to just kick your stuff. if that's all I could imagine, because there was no reason for, it was kind of scattered haphazardly behind the truck. It wasn't stacked or anything. We just unloaded it. I mean, it had to walk and kick this one, walk and kick that one.
Yeah, it's almost like it was throwing a temper tantrum, on the way out. I'm going to kick your stuff on the way out, which is it is humorous. It shows personality. When you first see this thing, it is rocking from side to side, and we hear that behavior a lot. And I'm really not sure if it's a nervous behavior or why they do that, but it's rocking from side to side. And I realize it's dark. You're not seeing, here's what its nose looked like, here's what its mouth looked like, but you're seeing it enough, and it's there in front of you. Two questions. One, when it stands up, how tall do you think it was? And physically, was there anything that stood out to you?
I wish there was, but no. It was almost the same color as the shadow. It was just slightly different color, but I could see that it was probably about 5 feet tall, and like I said, it was dramatically swaying. It was just pitching from side to side. It wasn't just like slightly moving. It was like, it was moving like 10, 12 inches each way, and it was going back and forth. And the whole time we were talking about it. And then when it elevated, I thought we were just looking at something that was like 5 feet tall. And then when it elevated, I can't say it doubled in size, but it got up there, and 7, 8 feet. It pretty close to double in size. And like I said, it didn't, how a human that was squatting and doing that, you'd stand up and go, oh man, my knees hurt, my back does this or whatever. And then turn and then run. It didn't do that. It just came from a squatted position to running off the road, if that makes any sense. It didn't, it was just one movement, and it was only on the road for maybe another second and a half, and it was off the road. It was moving fast.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got a chance to actually see it move, and they do move like that. It's very smooth, like your friend's saying. Is it flying? Reminds me of Claire in the intro. She talks about them gliding across the beach. But a lot of times when they move, they don't have that up and down motion like we do. It's like watching a cross-country skier or something like that. It's a very smooth motion. And, encounters are very strange. You always look back and go, well, why didn't we do this? Or why didn't we do that? And I think everyone goes through that. But when you're in that moment, it's hard to explain to someone else why, like you guys not leaving.
And I can't tell you why we stayed or why we didn't talk or why we didn't move. Once it passed the truck, we just stayed in our bags and didn't say a word to each other until we got up to, and I don't think we even hunted that morning. I think we did get in the truck and just go home.
Yeah, I hear ya. Did you and your friend ever talk about this after it's 43 years. Have you guys sat down and actually talked about that night?
Yeah. He lives up in Washington now. And so we don't get to talk all that much, but, yeah, we especially, like we were in high school, we'd be drinking beer and going, hey, boola boola, and we just joke about it and laugh. And our friends would go, you guys are nuts. But, so eventually you stop telling people about it because everyone just laughs at you.
And I realize this really wasn't an aggressive, you guys are 17-year-old kids, and this weird thing happened to you guys. Did it affect you at all after this encounter? Did you continue to hunt?
Oh yeah, I did. I hunted for years and years. I did guided hunts, horseback, bow, elk hunting, all over the place.
Yeah, I understand, especially since it really wasn't, an aggressive encounter. Let me ask you, Ed, I ask everyone this, and I know you're kind of a new listener to the show, and there's really no wrong answer, because no one really knows. But if someone were to ask you, what do you think Sasquatch is? What is it that you would say to them?
Well, I kind of have two thoughts on this. I kind of, whatever was there that night, that thing was, it was an animal. It was real. It was on 2 feet, and it had a head on it. And it was able to pick my big old truck up and shake it pretty good. and I heard it walking, and I heard its hair scrape against the truck. So it was an animal. But I also have issues with, like, there's opening day deer season here. There must be 100,000 guys go up to the D zone to go deer hunting. You can't go 50 yards without another man standing there with a rifle, and they just blanket the whole mountains. I mean, I don't know. Sasquatch should be running for his life those days. And the fact that, like, there's trail cams and all kinds of stuff now. And I don't know. I wonder, like, when that day is going to happen, that they're actually just going to be, some really great evidence,
Yeah, trust me, I get it. I think it's frustrating, after all these years, really what we have is trace evidence. And I stole that from the late Dr. Bennernagel. He used to tell me that what we really have is trace evidence. We have hair, we have footprints, we have, on and on and on. But when it's all said and done, what has to happen is one of these things has to be shot and brought in and put forth, cut its head off or whatever, bring it forth. And, that's more or less my words. John was one of the sweetest guys on the planet. I don't think he would hurt a soul. But he was right. That's what it's going to take to prove it. And it's just frustrating after all these years. You can take all the pictures, all of the audio, get all the hair that you want, get whatever you want, until there's a physical body there with all its guts in it. No one's really going to buy into it because it's such a weird taboo subject. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the only thing. I mean, not just the head. You'd have to have the whole thing, I think. People would come out and say, oh, it's fake, it was made up or something. I don't know. It would take a lot to, for it to be exposed as real.
Yeah, I hope one day in my lifetime anyway, we'll solve this mystery. But, in the meantime, until we have a body, I think the best way to really learn about these things is to hear from eyewitnesses and try and gather as much as you can. And I really appreciate you coming on, Ed. I know this happened to you 44 years ago, and to come forward and share it now, I really do appreciate it. And I enjoyed chatting with you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And it was good meeting and talking to you.
Next up on the show, I want to welcome Dylan. Dylan, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear your encounter, Dylan. I know when you and I were talking prior to coming on the show, you were pretty skeptical of Sasquatch even being out there, and you never really gave it another thought. And then this happens to you, and I know it happened to you back in 2011 in Georgia. If you would kind of tell us what you were doing and what happened.
Okay. So I was down in Helen, Georgia for a big car show at the time called Southern Worthy, or SOWO, as we all called it. From where I live, it was like 19-ish hours. So being of a car background and building cars and show cars and, pretty much anything related to the Volkswagen Audi car show scene, it was a big enough deal for me to drive down. Got there, kind of just got the lay of the land, realized it was pretty much just woods, minus the Chattahoochee River. Fast forward a couple days into the trip, a girlfriend that I was with at the time and I had gotten into an argument. I decided I was going to go for a walk, clear my head, grabbed my phone, my wallet, cigarettes, walked out the door, went for a nice little walk. Upon coming to where this, I don't know if it was out of use water park or abandoned water park, whatever the case may be, it was not something that was open the entire time I was there. It was on like this little road, and the road almost was like cut into a mountain, I guess is like how I would describe it. Like both sides, it was just like rock face once you got past the water park. Just, casually walking, hearing like little crackles and pops of like branches and twigs and stuff of something walking above me on the other side of the road. I wrote it off as like a deer or, some sort of a regular creature that would live in the woods, I guess. After I heard the pops or whatever, I noticed a Luna moth that I have never seen before, so I naturally stopped, looked at it. You know, I was like checking it out because I never saw one in person before. Pretty much, I don't know how long between the two events this actually happened, but I felt like within a couple seconds, I heard whatever was creaking and popping and breaking sticks behind me louder. Like it felt like it was coming towards the cliff, I guess, or rock face, whatever you want to call it. Pretty much tried to write it off again, but it was a little strange. Within probably a second of thinking, wow, that got real close, there was something that I would equate to now researching Bigfoot a little bit. I guess I would equate it to like something similar to an Ohio Howl, but not quite. I froze. I didn't even know what was going on. I couldn't rationalize what I was hearing, but I tried to like calm myself down and turn around and look to where I thought this sound had emanated from, which was, like I said, across the 2-lane road. You know, like once cars go one way, double line, cars go the other way. Not like a highway or nothing, just like a regular old road. And I look up the cliff, and I'm trying to make out like shapes, but all I had was the moonlight, because this particular road, there were really no streetlights or anything like that. My eyes were drawn to this one shape that looked like it moved between two trees. And it was the biggest, I don't want to call it human, but in my brain at the time, that's what I thought it was. Like, holy crap, that's a big guy. And then all of a sudden my eyes like focused, and I realized that's too big to be a guy. And I kind of the fear had begun to set in at that point. Like, I was beginning to feel like, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. I don't know how to react to this. And in the midst of my brain processing what was going on, it made this other sound that I don't think I would call it a growl. It was more like a tiger chuff, but deeper. Like kind of sounded like if you ever upset like your father or your grandfather as a kid, like, huh, like just a loud guttural exhale. And I was completely frozen at that point. And I kept trying to keep like eyesight of where it was, because it felt like if it wanted to like come and get me, it could have had me by the snap of a finger. It was impossibly big. Like, it was like two of me wide. And I remember seeing, like, once my eyes adjusted before I started to lose where it was, I remember seeing like muscle definition of like the shoulders and the tricep. And it was like a giant bodybuilder, but covered in like a dark fur almost. But being it was only like I had moonlight to look at, I couldn't tell exactly what color it was. It seemed as though it was darker than like tree bark though. So maybe like a dark brown, blackish color, but not like 100%. Once that happened and I was still trying to fight to see where it was or what it was doing, I had lost sight of it at one point and couldn't find it again. When that happened, I turned and ran as fast as I could for as long as I could, and pretty much ran all the way back to the hotel, which I would guess would have probably been like 3 miles nonstop. When I got back, I just sat down on the balcony and like processed and almost couldn't process. So I kind of like just packed it away and forgot about it.
Yeah, and I know that you're kind of a new listener, and I know that you're nervous. You told me, you were nervous before coming on, and I don't make a fool out of anyone. I've seen them before, and I was terrified. I mean, I was absolutely terrified when I ran into them. So I understand the way you feel. Let me ask you, when you first caught sight of it, how far away from you was it?
I would say probably within like 25, 30 feet. Just taking a guess based on the fact that it was just like a regular divided road. One line of traffic going one way, one line of traffic going the other way, and then the rock face. It wasn't something that I could have jumped down, but I feel like in my heart of hearts that this thing could have jumped down and been fine and kept going.
Yeah, that's really close. That's really, really close. I know at the time, when all this is going on, you're more of a car guy. You're not into Bigfoot. You're not into Loch Ness. You're not into ghosts. This isn't your wheelhouse, and you rarely ever gave it a second thought. But in this moment, you're now looking at this thing. What was kind of going through your mind? Because I know, from your description and your email, this thing seems to be much bigger than a man.
Oh, it was much bigger than a man. It was easily 2 of me wide, if not almost 3. It had I could have, if I laid down, his shoulders could have been longer. Like I almost felt like it could have like sack of potatoed me, and I would have never been seen again.
Yeah, I hear you. What did you think it was at the time?
I mean, I truly didn't know. I was like in my head, I was like trying to process, did I just get pranked? Was this one of my car show friends being funny, bringing like a gorilla suit? But then I was trying to rationalize that how could it account for not being 2.5 or 3 feet wide? How could it have been almost like 6 to 7-ish feet wide? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And that's when I was beginning to think like, holy crap, did I just see Bigfoot? It felt weird to think that.
Yeah, I hear you. I think we all go through that. After an encounter, I think, we as humans, we want to solve a mystery. We want to figure out what's going on. And, Bigfoot's weird. And there's a lot of weird things that go on with Bigfoot. And, the thing is that there's really no box that you can put it into. But I think most people who have encounters, they do the same thing you did. You play it over and over and over again in your head. And you're like, okay, well, this must be someone screwing with me in a gorilla suit. Okay, that doesn't make sense. I understand the way that the mind goes when you're trying to figure out what you're seeing. And I know that you don't know the answer to this, but I'm just curious on your opinion because you were there. What do you think the creature was doing?
I mean, maybe like coming down from like the mountains towards the river, because just on the other side of the water park was the Chattahoochee, which I actually, like, the next day upon my trying to put this out of my head, just hung out in a tube and floated down and saw like some snakes and fish and stuff like that. So maybe I would think like maybe coming down to like forage, I guess.
Oh, I gotcha. So it's not like it was stalking you. You think it was headed down in that general direction and you guys just cross paths.
Yeah, it definitely felt like it had something it was doing, but it wasn't like surrounding my being there or me or anything like that. Like I felt like it was like annoyed that I was there, like, oh man. And I feel like that's what that exhale was.
Yeah, I've heard of them doing that before, and I've talked to a lot of eyewitnesses that have experienced that kind of that huff or what's described as a chuff, that sort of thing. And I realize it's not the most pleasant thing probably to hear. It probably does sound terrifying coming out of one of these creatures. But, I've had a kind of a weird theory about that for a long time, and I could be wrong. Trust me. I'm wrong every day about many things. But, my opinion, when they huff or when they chuff at you, I've often wondered if that was kind of their way of acknowledging you. Kind of, you're there, I'm here. That sort of thing. And that's just from me gathering it from talking to eyewitnesses, more of their way of acknowledging that you're there. You may not feel that way, though, and I completely get that.
No, that could definitely be something that I could see it as, because, like, I feel like even though I was afraid and not knowing, like, what its intentions were, kind of looking back on it and knowing that I feel like if this thing wanted to do something to me, it could have. I don't think that's what its intentions were. I think it could definitely be like oh, hey, I see you over there. That does make sense now.
Yeah, and I want to make it really clear that's just my opinion. It's Wes Germer's opinion, and it really doesn't really hold a lot of water. It's just my thoughts on it. And the reason why I feel that way is after, interviewing so many eyewitnesses, a lot of times when they do that huff or that kind of that grunt, two things. One, I've noticed they're never hiding when they do it. Generally, they're in the open when they do it to people. And two, they're not aggressive when they're doing it. They're not growling. They're not really throwing anything. It's just a quick, huff at you. And a lot of times they'll leave generally after that. Not always, but sometimes. How did this affect you afterwards? And why not tell anyone? Were you concerned with ridicule?
Yeah, I definitely felt like it was like an impossibility what I saw, and I didn't really know how to like process it. And I felt like if I spoke out about it, everybody would have been like, okay, how drunk were you when you went for this walk? Or like something like that. But I was sober as a bird. And it was not something that I had expected to see. And it just like, it threw me for a loop. Like I just tried to like bottle it up and push it away and just make the best of what was left with the trip. But I can tell you at night, unless I was with a group of people and or in a car, it tripped me out to be out at night after that happened down there.
Yeah, I think it would trip most people out. And, it would trip me out. It would absolutely terrify me. And I don't think there's any shame in saying that. Like I said before, you're a car guy. You're not into Bigfoot. And now all of a sudden you're seeing something that shouldn't exist. And it's really hard to process. It's hard to deal with that emotion after seeing one of these things. But, I know it was back in 2011. All of this time has passed by. You've had a chance to kind of stop and think about it. And I know that you're a new listener, and I really appreciate you listening to the show. But, hearing other people talk about their encounters, I ask everyone, what do you think Sasquatch is? And there's no wrong answer. But I'm very curious on your opinion, Dylan. What do you think that these creatures are?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes flip a coin. I sometimes tend to delve down the whole path of like Gigantopithecus, but then other times I kind of find myself falling towards like something similar to like how we just figured out like the whole Denisovans and the Hobbit people and stuff like that. So I'm not really sure, honestly.
Yeah, and I appreciate your answer, and it's definitely a fair answer. When you were looking at this creature, I realize it's dark, and you're still seeing it though. It's right there in front of you. Was there anything that really stood out to you? One thing you still think about 11 years later?
I think I would honestly say the muscularity of it. Between like, I was a gym rat at the time, so I mean, not to sound weird, but that's the thing that I distinctly remember. I remember the definition of the shoulders and the shoulder muscles down into the triceps. It was like bodybuilder stature, insanely muscular. That's the thing that is like at the forefront of my brain about it.
Yeah, that's how most eyewitnesses describe them. You know, not always. Sometimes they're skinny and tall, but I would say your overall reports, they're very much how you just described it. And I think that's really what terrifies people when you run into these things, because they're just so much bigger than we are. I know you were nervous for, coming on the show and sharing it, but I'm really glad that you did, Dylan. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Oh, no problem. I thank you for having me on the show.
And that's it for tonight. Everyone, remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.